This is Spirit Gym. Today's guest is Federico Faggin, an Italian physicist turned inventor and author. Federico created silicon gate technology in 1968, a semiconductor manufacturing process that underlies all modern computing. Federico also created the first commercial microprocessor at Intel, created the touchpad, touchscreen, and was a pioneer in artificial intelligence development, putting the first neural net on a chip in 1989. Federico worked to create conscious experience in computers for years before concluding that it was impossible for computers to become conscious. After an awakening experience in which he experienced himself as the part whole of the totality of existence, Federico chose to dedicate his work to the understanding of consciousness. His latest book is Irreducible: Consciousness, Life, Computers, and Human Nature. Thank you for listening to this podcast, which would not be possible without you, our subscribers, and also our premier sponsors, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Wild Pastures. The sponsors' special offers and discounts are mentioned throughout this episode, or you can visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast.
Well, Federico, it's a great pleasure to have you here on Spirit Gym today, and I really love your books. I've got them both right here. I listened to your first one on audiobook while I was training in the gym and thought it was fantastic, and I've read as much through as I could with this one, and it looks like you've produced another excellent book, so I'm very grateful for that. And it's great for me to have you here because there's a lot of questions with your knowledge and your background that I've been wanting to find somebody that could answer these questions from the depth that someone with only your background could bring. So today's going to be an exciting day for me. For the listeners, Federico Faggin's first book is Silicon, and his second one, most recent, is Irreducible: Consciousness, Life, Computers, and Human Nature. And you're probably going to find Federico's depth quite impressive. If you haven't listened to the podcast that Andre Decum on Know Thyself did with Federico, it's excellent. I'd recommend that one as well. So thank you for being here, Federico.
My pleasure.
You know, Federico, I know that you're quite well known worldwide by those that study consciousness, computers, AI, and related areas, but I know many of my listeners around the world might not be familiar with your work. So I'd love them to get a sense of who you are and a bit of an overview of your life, your education, your work, and what shaped your spiritual perspectives and values. So feel free to share whatever feels comfortable and natural for you to share in that regard. I'd love to hear more myself.
All right, I'll go right on. So I was born in Italy in 1941, wartime, and I live after a year and a half with the invasion of the Allied forces from Sicily. My parents thought well to move in the countryside where they came from, and so I lived essentially living like people lived 2 centuries ago. We had electricity, but most homes didn't have electricity, didn't have running water, didn't have bathrooms inside the house, and so on, right? So they were still plowing the fields with oxen-ridden, oxen-drawn plows and all that kind of stuff, right? So 6 years of my life, from 1.5 to 7.5, was spent, in this type of environment. Then I went back to Vicenza. That was, then I met the Industrial Revolution there, and I went to a technical high school because I wanted to learn how to be an aeronautical engineer in the design and build airplanes, but they stopped having that specialty, and so I chose electronics. And when I graduated, when I was 18, after 5 years of this quite grueling school, I worked for Olivetti, which in those days was a major international company in office equipment, computers, and things of that sort. And they had just developed a year before, they had just introduced their first transistorized computer in Italy, the same year that IBM also introduced their first computer based on transistors. Before, the computers were using vacuum tubes, and the transistors were built in Italy by SGS at that time. That's the name of the company at that time. So I worked at Olivetti for about a year and 3 months, and after 3 months of training, I actually designed most of it and built a small experimental computer, also using transistors, which was an enormous experience for me, for anybody for that matter, not normal for a kid of 19. I had four technicians, all older than me, working for me at that time, but.
That's great.
And that computer worked, and that computer set my life really in terms of that job, what I learned, and the motivation that I got really set me up for the rest of my life. So I decided to study physics. Then after having finished this job, this computer, I decided to go back to school. I graduated in physics, cum laude, and went to work for a semiconductor company in Italy called SGS Fairchild, which was associated with the Fairchild Semiconductor here in the Bay Area. That is the company that developed the first monolithic integrated circuits, which was the seminal invention of microelectronics, how to make integrated circuits instead of just making transistors and together with the other components, they have to be all mounted in a printed circuit board. You create computers and whatever else you wanted to do in electronics. So transistors, could be connected directly in the same surface, in the same silicon in which they were built, together with resistors and capacitors and diodes. All the needed components in making a circuit where that circuit was the whole thing. Of course, not the whole thing, because the whole thing required lots of boards full of this stuff, but still in the direction where you could actually have everything in one single chip, which is what I did. I invented first in 1968 at Fairchild. I joined Fairchild in early 1968 as a guest engineer in exchange for a guest engineer that went to SGS Fairchild in Italy. As an exchange, I was supposed to stay 6 months, but my project was to develop a new technology that turned out to be the technology that changed the way to making integrated circuits. So eventually became the technology where almost every integrated circuit was built with, called silicon gate technology. It was an MOS technology, different than the bipolar technology that was used earlier. And it was much, much better than the previous MOS technology that had many limitations and could not really do all the pieces needed to make a computer on a chip, especially the memory and the microprocessor. And then the most important portion that was missing was the microprocessor, and I did that at Intel, that had taken that technology, used that to make memories that were made possible again with this technology. And at Intel, I developed the world's first microprocessor, the Intel 4004, and then all the first 4 other microprocessors in the industry. So then I decided to start my own company. That happened at the end of 1974, and I started Zilog, which was a company entirely dedicated to microprocessors. Intel was making microprocessor as a byproduct of making memories. They had not really understood that the future was really microprocessors. Of course, memories, but the memories are not where the smarts is. The memories are just the memory, and they're hard to make, but the real sophistication is in the microprocessor, and that's where my first product at Intel was, and then the later ones. So becoming an entrepreneur is kind of different than running projects. Before leaving Intel, I was head of almost all the R&D of Intel. I had 80 engineers and technical people working for me at Intel. So I knew how to run projects, but running a company, starting a company, finding money, all that kind of stuff I never done before. So that's where I learned my chops. I don't know.
Yeah, you got your
I
chops.
got my chops, right? Basically the school of hard knocks, right? You have to figure out things that you've never done before, and you don't have much time, and nobody is paying you yet, and so you have to get smarter, and finding that your intuition can be quite helpful. So then I in my the company, my first product was the Z80 microprocessor. Was the first third generation microprocessor. The second generation I did at Intel, and the Z80 became a bestseller. Is still in production today, 48 years later, and still being
Wow.
used today. Yeah, it's amazing. One of the few products that is still around of that era. And then I started in another couple of companies. My life is full of surprises. So my third company, I wanted to develop computers that learn. So using neural networks, what now is prevalent in artificial intelligence. But at that time, the people the experts in artificial intelligence were poo-pooing the artificial neural network. That will never work. What are you talking about? This BS. So, but it turned out that was the right way to solve the difficult problems of artificial intelligence, which was complex pattern recognition, recognizing faces, recognizing and writing, and things of that sort. So those were all made possible by that technology. And when I was in that stage of my life, I was also studying neuroscience and biology because I wanted to understand how the brain really works. Because the artificial neural networks are a caricature of the brain, of the neural networks, the biological neural networks of the brain. So while I was studying those books, at one point I was reading, how do we feel, for example, the smell of a rose, or the taste of a, the taste of a cherry. What happened? And so they were describing mechanically what happens, like these molecules are recognized by the special cells that recognize the shape of the molecules, and when they recognize the shape, they send electrical signals to the brain. The circuits of the brain analyze those the correlation between those signals, and then they find that there is a particular correlation, that they recognize the smell of the rose or the taste of cherry. And I asked myself, well, wait a second. I mean, the electrical signals in the brain are not the smell of the rose. The smell. How do you get smell from electrical signals? What translation is there to do that, or the electrical signals in the brain to the taste of cherries, or the love that I feel? Where's the is the love that I feel electrical signals in the brain? That's impossible.
You're right.
There must be something else. There must be some other transformation going on. But what is it? And basically, I describe the hard problem of consciousness that made famous a philosopher that wrote a book in '95, so about 7 years later or so, after I figured it out, that this was a problem, but he had the capacity to really write about it and explain it. And actually, he made understandable to scientists that the problem of consciousness was never explained by them. They always say that's something that happened in the brain, like any kid can figure it out, right? So we don't. Why do we want to waste time with that, right? When in fact, that was a serious problem. How can you do that?
Are you talking about Chalmers?
David Chalmers, yes, of course. And David Chalmers, figured it out independently, clearly, because I was only interested in making integrated circuits, not writing books on taste of flowers. But the point is that consciousness then became an issue for me. I wanted to understand, how can you do that, from the practical point of view. And at that time I was a physicalist, I was a materialist, and so everything had to come out of matter. Computers should be able to do anything, because Computers is a universal computational device. And so, with that mindset, I was at least honest with myself to say, well, then I should be able to do it. So let me figure out how to do it, So not just, okay, that's silly, simple, so forget about it. Solve the problem because we have declared it simple. And so I started thinking about it, what kind of computers or informational structure, clearly not computer, could not do it. Computer would have to have sensors and actuators, more like a robot. A computer should be more like the intelligence of a robot that also can interact with the environment. So clearly it would have to have something like that is able to learn, but is able that through learning, then somehow, recognize that he has learned. How, in some kind of consciousness, what is it? So, basically after a couple of years of trying, of course that was not a full-time occupation, but 5% of my time I was dedicated to trying to figure this problem out. And I couldn't, the more I tried, the more difficult and impossible, because it allowed me to kind of get a sense of what consciousness is. At that time, I was also unhappy, despite having achieved everything that life's, people say, or the environment says, or whoever says, that we should be happy if we do that. And I wasn't. So there was something wrong with that picture, right? So and that was a problem of consciousness, because happiness or lack of it is a problem of consciousness. How you feel, and feelings are not electrical signals. That was clear. So. And it was in this environment that I have an extraordinary experience of consciousness. I think it came to me spontaneously, but because I really wanted to understand. It was, I couldn't let go of it. I wanted to understand, but not to do anything with it, just to understand. And so I had this experience, which happened during a vacation in Lake Tahoe. Basically an experience in which I experienced myself not as love, peace, and joy, and as observing myself as love, peace, and joy. Because the energy that came from me, that came from my body, was physical. It was a white scintillating light that felt love, peace, and joy. And then it expanded. My consciousness was in this light. Then it expanded everywhere. My consciousness was in this expanded light, white scintillating light. And therefore, I was observing myself. I was both the observer and the observed, which from a materialistic point of view is crazy. I mean, that's impossible. And in fact, it would have been impossible. It would be impossible if it wasn't true. And the fact that we can do that, we can have such an experience which is incredibly mind-boggling, but turn my sense of who I am 180 degrees. I basically understood that I am not my body. I am something beyond the body for the first time. Because who I am, the sense of me, which is my consciousness, was inside my body and outside my body. So how is that possible? So that really got my curiosity going. And so the rest, so the rest of my life, was spent, of course, I kept on running my own company, but more and more of my time was spent trying to understand the mystery of consciousness. And after a 20-year journey, this experience came in 1990, and about 20 years later, so 18, 20 years later, it was clear to me that consciousness must be fundamental. It must exist before matter, before space, time, and matter, or at the same time the space, matter, time and matter emerge. Consciousness also emerges simultaneously with space, time, and matter. It could not be something that happens later, because consciousness is what allows you to know and to basically act in the world. And so how else could you explain the universe otherwise? How can you explain that matter later can create consciousness or create the mathematics that explains the matter when, matter doesn't have any consciousness. Consciousness cannot come from matter because matter, unconscious matter, no matter how you combine it, is unconscious. So what this idea that, matter is the base of everything, if it is the base of everything, then it must be an expression of consciousness. And right now, my theory is that matter is an expression of consciousness, is the symbolic aspect of the most important aspect of consciousness, which is to know itself, that can know itself, is the stuff that can know itself. The universe can know itself. Wow. So anyway, so once I got through this, I had this beginning hypothesis that was based not on reading books, it was based on my own experiences, because in these 20 years where I studied consciousness, I had many other extraordinary experiences of consciousness. Almost all of them, were basically, spontaneous. They came as an answer to questions that I was asking myself, and so it would maybe in a dream, maybe in a meditation, maybe in other situation, in a dialogue, in a special dialogue with others. This stuff would come up, this revelation would come up, and so in trying to explain what I have experienced, not what I read, what I have experienced, then I came with this hypothesis. This hypothesis, of course, was consistent with hypotheses of the perennial philosophy, that consciousness must be primary, that there must be free will, and those things which are hot, at that time they were hotly debated or dismissed, actually more dismissed than debated in the scientific circles. Like, you believe in free will? Come on, the free will that cannot exist, bullshit, right? Boom, 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 right? That's it, right? So, and consciousness, it must be an epiphenomenon, it must something that happens in the brain. But who cares? Because this is the brain that decides. So don't worry about it. That was the typical reaction to my, when I would talk with the typical scientist or engineer or whatever, people with a STEM education. They would simply, they would dismiss the problem. Because they never thought about it. They never had a moment where they asked themselves the question. But since I asked myself the question, reading books first, and then by being very unhappy and not understanding why, and the problem of unhappiness, I realized after understanding what meaning, the meaning and the stuff that comes along with the feelings, because the feelings are where the meaning of the symbols is. And in science, information doesn't have any meaning. In science, information is simply a function of the probability that something manifests. That's it. No meaning. So, the foundation of science has eliminated meaning, and therefore the meaning of the universe, the meaning of our life, by fiat, by simply saying that everything must be matter, and therefore everything must be explained with matter. And if you cannot explain it, pretend that you explain it by calling it an emergent property. An emergent property of the brain is consciousness. Can you explain how it emerges? No. So what are you talking about? You see what I mean? This arrogance that hides behind big words to simply pretend that they are right, that their starting point, their ideology is correct, when in fact it isn't. It is correct under certain conditions, and it works. I have nothing against science, actually. I think science is the only solution that we can have, but not the only. Is part of the solution, because the other part of the solution is the fact that we are conscious, that we feel love, that we feel sometimes the courage to go against our interests because it's the ethical thing to do. Where does it come from? Are we stupid when we do that? Or are we really closer to what we should really be? So, all this stuff is what now I can articulate after leaving what I was doing. So, because 20 years ago was about 15 years ago. And so, for the last 15 years, I've studied consciousness as my only occupation. I wrote 3 books, two of them are in English also. The other one is only in Italian right now, but it will be translated in English. And I have the first theory of consciousness, which is based on fundamental principle, not based on philosophy. It's not a philosophy; it's a theory of consciousness, and shows that if you start with consciousness and free will as a given, they must be there from the beginning. It's like you cannot explain why God exists. You have to start by claiming that he exists or he doesn't exist. Whatever you do, you cannot prove it. So if you start from consciousness and free will must be part of the universe from the very beginning as a postulate, then you can explain why quantum physics must have the crazy properties that everybody says that it has. Because those crazy properties are exactly the properties of your conscious experience. They are private, and you can only you can know your own experience. And when you try to find out, you can only find out very little about what the experience tells you. For example, the love that I feel, I want to find the meaning of the love that I feel. I know that there is certain meaning, but I know that I don't know. So by knowing that I don't know, I'm motivated to find out. Really, you see. So in that process of in the capacity of qualia, the sensations of telling you that you know certain things but you don't know others, is a wisdom kind of thing that is inherent in who we are, that machine cannot have. The machine, they're only electrical signals. There is nothing there. No computer is conscious of anything. They simply repeat, re-elaborate what we learn. We taught them. We built those computers. We gave them the data to learn from. We taught them how to do it, and then we pretend that they are independent, which is silly. So anyway, long story, but
That's great. No, it's beautiful. I really loved it. I was curious, what were you doing when you had that first experience of yourself as the observer and the observed?
I was skiing.
Oh,
I was on a
cool.
vacation. No, it happened. It didn't happen while I was skiing. It happened while I was on a skiing vacation. We had a home up in vacation home in Tahoe at that time, and the family was there. So it was the only vacation that I took a year. In those days, about 10 days around Christmas. So the whole family was together. It was wonderful, and so I was very relaxed and so on. But I was still thinking about this stuff, right? And one night I woke up and it happened.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I was just curious. Oftentimes there's circumstances such as very stressful experiences or very peaceful experiences, or oftentimes when you're doing repetitive exercise, such as rowing, biking, swimming, jogging, we go into a flow state. And so we open the gateway for these more expanded states of consciousness. So I was just wondering, I personally have had, a long string of these mystical experiences that have come through a variety of different experiences. The first one for me, interestingly, was when my first child was being born. I was just turned 18. And as I watched his head come out of the birth canal, I was blown into a complete union with the entire universe. And it scared the hell out of me because I'd never experienced anything like that. But then found myself in every star, somehow looking through the hospital right at my son's head.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And this lasted, I would guess, maybe 8 or 10 seconds. And then, so the nurse is trying to talk to me and tell me stuff, and I'm like so shocked I can't even talk, just a crazy thing. So I'm always curious what people were doing when they had that first magical experience.
There are very few things more magical than a birth, right? I mean, how is that possible? How is that possible? Have you seen computers give birth to another computers from their own belly, for Christ's sake? I mean, and then there are scientists that are telling you, oh, biology, it's just a wet computer. So what the hell, it's just like, they don't even understand what they're talking about. Biology is quantum. It's not classical. You couldn't have anything classical that does what I'm talking about. Something that is a part whole. Every cell of our body is a part whole of the entire body, because the genome of the egg that created the entire organism is in every part of the body. The entire genome, not the little piece that is good for that part. Everything. A part whole. And most people will not, first when I say it, they kind of, what is he talking about? Because nobody thinks in these terms. But think about it. Every part contains the potential knowledge of the entire organism. We have 50 trillion or so cells. Each cell has within itself the potential knowledge of the whole. What does it mean? That within that cell can change in its life in ways that were not present at its birth. A transistor or a computer, first of all, a transistor or a computer doesn't know anything about the computer, or worse yet of the software that runs in the computer. So, but on top of that, can the transistor change its function while the computer exists? It would be foolish. I mean, people would say, "Are you crazy or what?" The transistor is simply a circuit that is open or closed. Lets current through or not. That's it. That's all it does. A cell is a world, is a universe, is a part whole. Like we are parts whole of one. We are parts whole of the universe, but not we, the body. It's not the body that is a part whole. It's we as quantum fields that are quantum in nature, but must be conscious and have free will. So the consciousness and free will of ours is in the fields that we are, not in space and time. Not in space and time. Space and time is an epiphenomenon of our conscious experience. Is how we see the whole from the outside. And from the outside, then time emerges by the way that the body acts in the world, in the environment. So the time is an epiphenomenon of consciousness, because within consciousness there is the present. There is no time moving. There is only a present that expands, but is always in the present. So that's also what you find, and this makes a lot of sense from the physics point of view, not just for the metaphysics, and similar things have been said before, but nobody can understand them. But once you understand that consciousness is a property of fields, of quantum fields, and so is free will, then you can begin to rethink the foundation of physics with cognitive principles, because the universe one wants to know itself, just like we want. We are parts whole, but why do we want to feel? Why do we want to know itself? Since we are 2 or 3 years old, what is the first thing that we do? Ask to our parents, "Why, Daddy? Why, Mom? Why this? Why that?" To the point that you say, "Stop it! It is this way because it is this way." Whatever, stop and eat, whatever, right? But that desire to know, to understand the why, science doesn't respond today to the why. They only give you the how. They only give you how to put together things, how they work, the functioning. They describe the functioning, but they pretend that the consciousness is about functioning, when no, the consciousness is what creates functioning. Not the seat of functioning, but the creator of functioning.
One of our podcast sponsors, Wild Pastures, has just released an amazing documentary series on the role of animal products in both diets and ecosystems. It is a deep dive into the health benefits of animal products, challenging the conventional narrative that links meat to chronic illness and debunking myths about the dangers of meat for our bodies and the environment. Featuring leading experts and real-world examples, it makes a compelling case for embracing a more holistic view of food production to restore both personal health and planetary health. As regular listeners of Spirit Gym with Paul Chek will know, Paul adamantly supports responsible livestock farming and regenerative agriculture, and highly recommends everybody watch this series. Go to wildpastures.com/rethink meat to to watch now. It's completely free and new episodes are released each week. This is something you're going to want to share with your family, friends, co-workers, and colleagues. So go to wildpastures.com/rethink meet and start watching now.
Federico, now this concept of the part whole, it sounds very similar to what Ken Wilber calls a hole-on.
Yes,
Are you familiar with the hole-on concept?
Yeah, I figured it out afterwards, but to me, it had to be. I was not influenced by that because it was the way that I could tell to myself what was going on. So yeah, so part whole seemed to be a good way of saying it because it's something which is both, and the fact that it comes from the holism of one. If one, which is what quantum physics says. Quantum physics says that quantum physics is holistic. What keeps everything, all the parts communicating together is the entanglement, which is the property that only exists in quantum physics. Physicists fought for many decades its existence, but then they had to withdraw their resistance because all experiments demonstrated that entanglement exists and it has those crazy properties that Einstein refused to believe could exist back in 1935. So
I'm familiar. I'm wondering if you're familiar with the scientist that worked with Einstein named Jean Cheron.
No.
Okay, there's a book I think you're going to find really interesting. It's an older book, but it's phenomenal. It's called The Unknown Spirit by Jean Cheron. And he was quite spiritual. And he actually proposes a theory and gives mathematical backing for his theory that electrons are consciousness and have memory, and that they're actually storing memories and that they're actually going into a state of negentropy within themselves while the material form is going into entropy. So there's like a dual process happening. But as you were talking, I thought, I wonder if Federico's ever heard of Cheron's theory, because I think you'd find it fascinating and it might touch some.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I want to look it up because I never heard of him. Probably because he's talking about spirit as a physicist.
Well, it's really good. And with your depth of understanding, you'll be able to follow his math, and his books are written for the public. The first one, The Unknown Spirit, is the more technical of the. I think there's two of them. I've read them both, but I can't remember the name of the second one. You talked about the mind. That's something I've studied a lot and done a lot of inner work with. To me, our mind is a non-local reality. You're speaking of fields. I'm assuming because they're out of space-time that you're speaking of non-locality, or are you speaking of it in a hyperdimension, or where do you perceive mind to be?
Mind, since the state of a field must be described in Hilbert space. Hilbert space is an n-dimensional space where the dimensions are complex numbers. So they're not even numbers, because complex numbers, we say numbers, but they're not really numbers, because a complex number uses the imaginary, the sum of a real part and an imaginary part, and the imaginary is square root of -1, and there is no number that multiplied by itself can give you -1. So the square root of -1 does not exist in the field of normal numbers. And in fact, the imaginary numbers can represent waves, repeating waves. And so they, in fact, a complex number can be represented in a plane, not in a line, And that's is a very, very important distinction. And when you put together vectors that are made whose components are complex numbers, they cannot exist in space and time. In space-time, in fact, what does exist that reflects the state of the quantum state of a field? The probability distribution of all the possibilities that might manifest, but not the states that will manifest. That is not part of quantum physics. That's the big problem in quantum physics. Nobody has ever figured out what is going on. In our theory, the theory that I have with Professor Dariano, which is a luminary in quantum information, is that the field that is observed is the one that has free will, and it is the one that decides what to manifest. That's why, from the outside, it looks like a random event. But from the inside, the field knows what it wanted, and it emitted state. The particle is not an object. The particle is a state of a field. Therefore, when you say an electron has these properties, they are not properties of the electrons, they are properties of the field that manifest in that electron, which is really what we need to introduce in order to explain an interaction between the field of electrons and the appropriate field of the instrument that is measuring, is forcing. The instrument is forcing an interaction between the field of the particle that you want to know and the measuring system that creates the event that then becomes a classical information that you measure. Cannot be cloned, cannot be copied, cannot be known. If it can be known, it can only be known by the field. And that's exactly why this theory explains, if there is consciousness, then the state of the field must be non-clonable, which is exactly, it is what scientists have found. The no-cloning theorem says the state of the field cannot be copied. Not only that, but what we can know about the field, if we do a measurement, is only one classical bit per quantum bit that describe the field, that describe the quantum state, sorry. So the quantum state can be described by a huge number of quantum bits that are entangled. And the entanglement is impossible to know. If you prepare two electrons whose spin are entangled, you can do that, but those are the systems that you can actually test, and but sophisticated complex systems that are all entangled, like a living cell, for example, where the atoms and molecules interact with each other, the particles, the electrons and the protons interact with each other, they are all entangled. You cannot know what's going on. You can never know. You can never do a simulation of a cell with a computer, because there are quantum systems that behave with quantum laws. So that type of information is neither quantum information nor classical information. It's something in between. I call it live information. And that's the type of information that describes how living organisms, living cells, work. Living cells are not biological systems. They are informational systems.
And wouldn't you describe what we call mind as living information?
Mind goes beyond, because mind, see, first of all, we have to distinguish two things. Mind is the seat, in a sense, of qualia. Like a thought is a quale. Quale is this singular, qualia is plural. So a thought is a feeling, right? We perceive it as a feeling, the thought. Then when the thought actually becomes words in our mind, then it's like a collapse wave function. In other words, from a feeling that had many possibilities that were in superposition, but when you collapse it into words, then the words are now classical information, because they are classical states in the neural networks of the brain. But before the collapse, the thought or the intuition or the imagination is not in the brain, is in this vaster reality that could only be described with Hilbert space, n-dimensional Hilbert space. It can only be described with quantum states, but these quantum states can only represent what we experience. In other words, the representation of an experience is not the experience. The experience, the representation of the experience says this is the taste, this is a state that is the taste of cherries. But that's where mathematics ends. It can only tell you the structure, the representation, the map, not the territory. The territory is the taste of the cherry in my mouth, which is not in my mouth, is in that larger field that we are. Our body is within this larger reality that where my consciousness is, which is a field, and all of my consciousness, my free will, my sensations and feelings, my most important, as meaning, they are in this larger field. So, in a sort of the simplest classification that we could do is that the body is matter, symbolic matter, classical matter. The spirit is the fields with their capacity that goes beyond qualia, is the capacity to perceive the qualias, to know the qualia, to get the meaning of qualia. The qualia are simply the carrier of meaning, just like a symbol is a carrier of qualia. The physical symbols are carrier of qualia, and the qualia is the carrier of meaning. The meaning is a quality, is the deepest quality of spirit, the capacity to truly know, understand, comprehend. Comprehend is the meaning. The way you feel about it is qualia. The signals that come from the world, those are symbols, just classical symbols. You see? So the mind bridges the two worlds, the world of matter and the world of meaning, with qualia. But qualia is a representation, as I keep on saying. But these three worlds are not separate. This is the other thing. In other words, matter, I said earlier that an electron, for example, a particle, is a state of a field, meaning it's like a wave in the sea, cannot be separated from the field. So it is really a property of the field, strictly speaking, like the wave of the sea is not, you cannot see it separate from the sea. It's an integral part of the sea, and it is a property of the sea. It manifests aspects of the sea in that way. The same way an electron is the property of the field of electron. This is everywhere, and it is a representation. It cannot be separated from the field, and it represents whatever the field at that moment in time and space wants to represent. Those are the symbols with which the field of electrons speaks or communicates with other fields. See, that's the way to interpret, in my theory, to interpret what physics is saying. Well, it's an electron. The electron, because the properties of the electrons are really properties of the field, because strictly speaking, there is only the field.
Yeah, these are all thoughts that work with my own beliefs, experiences, and theories, because I've studied consciousness extensively myself, both internally and through research and things like that. It's interesting, too, because in my science dictionary, a field is described as a place of action. So even though it's in Hilbert space or non-local, technically speaking, a field is a place of action. So if you think of the ocean, like we use the analogy of the ocean as consciousness and the waves as the phenomenon that we become aware of, then the ocean of consciousness would be the field. And it's interesting, I'm sure you're familiar with the poet Rumi. He has a pretty powerful statement. He says something quite interesting you may have heard before. Rumi says, "Beyond judgment, there is a field. I will meet you there." And so beyond judgment, which is rational thinking.
And also, the judgment is also collapse of the wave function. In other words, the judgment is a conclusion, so that manifests as a word or a new symbol from a sea of potential symbols. You go to a particular symbol, and so a judgment is a conscious decision of a field in my terminology. Okay, and a particle is simply, you call it action, but I call it a communication. It's a symbol to communicate, because action is only a symbol to communicate. Communicate what? Meaning. The meaning, which is a property intrinsic to the field. Only the field can know its meaning, because meaning is the essence of qualia, and qualia can only represent what you feel. But qualia by themselves are not enough. When I feel love, I want to understand, why do I feel love, that kind of love? What does it mean? You see, so the meaning of qualia is deeper than qualia itself. And the meaning must be understood in terms of the complete, of the sense of my life, of my own total experience, of the context of my own rich experience. Then I can get the meaning of something. So it's not something which is inside the qualia. It's in the correlation of this, the way I feel, in correlation with everything that I've ever felt.
You must be familiar with Rudolf Steiner's
a little
work,
bit.
Are
A
you?
little bit. I read some of his work. Yeah.
Yeah, Steiner goes quite deep into thought. And Steiner says that thought is the flow of spirit. I define in my system spirit as the flow of energy and information. And so from Steiner's perspective, well, it would be very long to explain, but basically, because we are connected to everything, if you go to the field that's thinking, the flow of energy and information, Steiner would describe as spirit. So when we're thinking, it's the spirit that's non-local coming through the field that we call our mind, that's triggering the classical reaction of the biochemistry of the brain, that's leading to our perception of what we're doing. So I'm touching my face, but the thought, touch your face, would be the flow of spirit, and then the action to touch my face would be, the classical dimension, because now I'm moving my arm. Or put another way, the spirit or the thought would be like the radio wave controlling the remote control car. The body would be the avatar, if you will, that's responding to the spirit, like a remote control car responds to the radio wave.
Yeah, from my perspective, I would agree so only partly with that, because from my perspective, spirit, the essence of spirit is meaning, and self-knowing is meaning. You don't self-know qualia. Qualia is the carrier of meaning. So this is a very few people are. In fact, I'm perhaps one of the very first to have made a clear distinction between qualia and meaning. Information is a carrier of qualia. The physical information, what we call information, is actually the carrier of qualia from the physical point of view. From our own soul point of view, is the carrier of meaning, because the symbol for us is meaning. See, what we feel about is simply a transition. That's the mind. The mind can be seen as, the aspect of mind that is closest to mind is qualia, like thought. But the deeper part of qualia, so the more intuitive part, the part of ourselves that communicate with spirit, not the part that communicate with matter. The part that communicate with spirit is the higher mind. The part that communicate with matter is the lower mind, if you want to call it that way. You see, which is what I call live information, is the type of information of mind communicating with the cells of the body. But mind communicates with the cells of the body as a carrier, as a part of spirit that wants to have the experience, because the experience is not in mind. The experience is in spirit. Consciousness and free will are a property of spirit, not a mind. You see, so, in other words, for example, you go out of body, right? If you go out of body, you are in a different body. The body is clearly not made of this physical matter as we know it, because it can go through the wall, and your body cannot go through the wall at all, right? But it's a body. So that body, people call them astral body, or or etheric body.
I'm a remote viewer. I know all
Yeah,
about
all
it.
right. So but the point is that there is, there are, we have nested levels, right, of reality, okay, and generally we, if we want it, the most simple thing is that body, mind, and spirit, but even body may have more than one level, just as physical body, and then mind can have more than one level as etheric or astral bodies, and then spirit may have more than one level. So as you know, there are hierarchies, right? So we need to. Reality is not as simple as we would like to make it, but if you want to go to the simplest possible way of thinking, then we have three levels, which is body, mind, and spirit. But then we have to be very clear to make a distinction that consciousness and free will are really property of spirit, not property of mind, and not property of body.
Yes. Somebody I think you might find interesting, because she's got a theory on meaning, a lady named Chris H. Hardy, who's a scientist, Chris H. Hardy. She's written several books, and she's got a theory called the infinite spiral staircase, and she describes in her theory that there are sigmantic fields, which are fields of meaning, and if I remember right, she uses Hilbert's space to show how they're nested throughout all of creation, from in biology, in space, everywhere.
Perfect. I call it semantics. I call it C space, which my CIP theory. C space is the space of consciousness that I call it semantic space. But I never heard any, I never read anything of people that call this semantic space, but which is perfectly fine. Actually, it shows that if the deepest thinkers in our world come up with similar or the same kind of notions and concepts, it means if it actually validates it, we validate each other, right? I mean, because how else can you experience? I mean, how else can you know that? You can only, how can, you cannot take an instrument in Hilbert space, okay? So how do we know the reality of that world? We have to use consciousness, is the only instrument to do that. And we have it in spades. And so if that instrument then brings information, and your instrument brings similar information or the same information that I have, it's like validation of an experiment done in a laboratory for physics, right?
So I think how that happens is we go into sympathetic resonance, right? If you're thinking about sigmantic fields and Chris Hardy's thinking about them and they're important to you, then your desire is drawing you into sympathetic resonance with, whether you want to call it the information or the reality of sigmantic fields.
Paul, those are all words that that complicate more than simplify my mind. Because if we are part whole of one, we have the potential knowledge of one within ourselves. So it's not sympathetic resonance simply that you have the same source that I have. We are parts whole of one. If a cell knows something, having the genome of the entire organism, it can know something about the organism because it has the capacity to do it. So we have it, and so it isn't necessary to if anything, we enter into resonance with one, with the reality of one, right? So that we basically have access to the memory of one of itself, of its own experience over the eons. Because one must.
I'm thinking about the many situations such as Newton and Leibniz simultaneously coming up with calculus, or two people coming up with the same invention on opposite sides of the world. That I'm saying we're going into resonance with each other and meeting in the place, in the one where that consciousness or that concept or information lives.
Yeah, but that type of information is a much lower level than getting the sense of your true nature. We were talking about our true nature. So when we try to access the level of true nature, then we are really in touch with really within nature of one, not with a higher self. In other words, the ability to have an invention at the same time in different parts of the world is simply a higher being than us, but not God, or not one, not the totality of what exists. Has that knowledge, and we can tap into that. We are not the ego self, right? We believe to be the body. So when we believe to be the body, we are simply limited to the ego self, which is a small portion of who we are. At least this is the way I'm thinking about it. In other words, not the entire self is embodied. Only a small part of who we are is embodied, and so we have other parts of ourselves that have knowledge that we can tap if our ego is not so, determined to just be the body. If it opens up, it can have access to information of fields, our own field, or even other fields that communicate with our field, without being the highest possible field, the field of fields, which is one. Sure, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, desire is but in fact, when you're out of body, when you desire to be someplace, you end up being someplace, that place that you desire to be, right?
That's how I remote view. I just hold the intention of, say, being on the sun, and I let my mind empty, but I tune my consciousness to the sun and allow it to arise. And once I feel myself connected to the sun, I just hold the intention to walk and move, and my astral body just walks right out of my body, and I'm there. So we do have these abilities. It's just that because of the kind of environment we're in, with all the scientific materialistic mindset, most people are in denial of what's innate in them, and I think that's part of the evolution that we need to go through is to either remember or experience the parts of ourselves that are being pushed into the background of our consciousness due to the way the ego has been structured by culture largely.
Absolutely.
And now Bioptimizer's Magnesium Breakthrough is available in a delicious flavored drink powder. It's packed with all 8 forms of magnesium, sweetened with Katem fruit extract that is 3,000 times sweeter than sucrose but does not spike glucose when metabolized, and made with organic flavors and colors. Choose from fruit punch flavor, raspberry lemonade, banana mango, or add your own choice to the unflavored options. To try Magnesium Breakthrough Drink, go to bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the promo code PAUL10 for 10% off your first order. That's bioptimizers.com/living4, the letter D, and the promo code is PAUL10.
You kind of led right into my next question when you were talking about reality. And so I've got many, many books on reality and entire books on the debates of what reality is. And when we look at sort of the spectrum, we have kind of the scientific materialist views of reality that we would see on one end, but then we can look into philosophies like Vedanta or Hinduism, which speaks of Maya and the world as an illusion. So their perspective of reality would be on the completely other end. One says it's tangible, here I am, and the other one says it's all an illusion. And so because there's so many ways you can go with it, and it's one of those things that's very, very hard to give objective proof of, I put it to my own task to describe it. So I came up with 2 definitions of reality, and then I wanted to share those with you, and then and let you respond to what your thoughts, based on your experience and your investigations, are. So my 2 definitions of reality are: reality is everything that supports your ability to stay alive, and reality is what's happening right now. Because if you don't tend to what keeps you alive, like breathing, eating, drinking, moving, you won't be alive. So you'll be in a different reality. And reality is what's happening right now, because that you can't deny that.
Well, I think reality is more than both of the things that you have mentioned, at least in my mind. First of all, we know, I mean, at least I don't know if you believe that we are not the body. So we must, if we're not the body and we survive the death of the body, which I believe and also have experienced, not as a near-death experience, but something similar. And so at that point, the deeper reality is the one that survives the death of the body, which would deny reality to the body, because the body, in many ways, physics, the reality of physics is when something functions, is real. If it doesn't function anymore, it's something else. So a computer that doesn't work is a piece of junk. A computer that works is more real than a computer that doesn't work. But I don't agree with that. But generally there is that sense that reality to me is anything that consciousness perceives is real. Okay? But in fact, it goes beyond that, because the potential for something to exist must exist before the existence of the potential. So the potential is a type of reality that goes beyond the reality of what you can know, which is the reality of consciousness. So anything in consciousness that consciousness perceives is a reality that is, is of the first level. Then there might be lower level realities, degrees of reality. But certainly the potential of existence is the highest form of reality, which even one doesn't yet know, because one can only know reality when it experiences in its own consciousness. Otherwise, it's darkness. So, in fact, for me, the totality of what exists, you can read it also in Irreducible. I start with the potential of existence, and then there is actual existence, which is the reality, the manifesting consciousness. That's actual existence. So that's reality in the sense that you could deal with, because the one that is potential you cannot even deal with. It's just it's unknown, impossible to know, not manifested yet. So that's the deeper reality, and but it must be real, right? I mean, how can you get something from nothing? I mean, that's the idea, that you can get something from nothing is the most stupid thing that I've ever heard. There has to be some bed potentiality out of which anything that manifests comes from that bed of potentiality. Otherwise, it's impossible.
Right. I think one of the fundamental problems with that mindset of how do you get something from nothing is that what we're talking about, to step one step back, I describe, because I'm a therapist and I deal with people's health and life challenges and relationship challenges and life crisis. So oftentimes when I'm talking to people that are materialists or atheists, and I need to convey a concept to them that would be the equivalent of what a religious or spiritual person will relate to as God, I simply say to them that what I referred to as God, you would refer to as the potential to exist. And the experience of existing is what life is, and that's God in its potential to exist, or its desire to exist. So instead of using the word God, I say, look, if you just think of the universe as a giant electrical circuit, you'd have to say, where does the potential to create the electricity to drive the planets and the stars and create them come from? Well, I say, for example, look, if you have a 12-volt battery in your car, it's got potential. It starts your car, it runs your lights, your radio, but your battery in your car doesn't care whether you run a vibrator, a cake mixer, a radio, or headlights on it, but it has the potential. And so I try to help people understand that don't have room for God in their head, that if you just think of God as potential, then you can understand that whatever is in existence comes from that ultimate source of potential. And so I just wanted to share
No,
that
no,
with you.
I agree.
I think that helps them.
I mean, the deepest part of one. In fact, I sometimes I think I wrote, I call it the unconsciousness of one, or the environment of one. One is communicating with his own environment, like we communicate with the environment, the physical environment. You know, so the environment is the one where there is a communication, and the communication with the potential, the field of potentiality, which is part of one, is the source of all creations. But creation is not in the sense of the creation of God that creates a human being all made. I mean, that's complete stupidity. But the creation in the sense, but no, the creation of is the self-knowing that arises. His own process of self-knowing. That matter is something that helps one know itself. Mind first, and then matter help one know itself. And so they had to be part of the nature of one. So the body, mind, and spirit must be the trinity in a sense, seen from a more scientific point of view than a religious point of view. Which are necessary for one to know itself. But all those three aspects of one are coexistent with the bed of potentiality, which is the deepest, is what some of the religious call the absolute. Nobody can see anything. One itself doesn't know. God itself cannot know that. But in a religious, in religions where God starts with being omniscient already, there is no point to knowing yourself. There is no, for one, he already knows everything. So, with that kind of viewpoint, you cannot explain why there is any evolution at all, other than some kind of game that one is playing with himself, and we happen to be part of this game. But I mean, that's silly. I mean, then it's starting with some stupidity, and then you get out more stupidity. But the point is that matter is a derivative of something deeper than matter. And that's where scientism is, we have a problem, because scientism is trying to prove that the more comes from the less. The more, meaning the spiritual values, all the things that matter, our humanity, are all phenomena of matter. So, and they call them emergent phenomena. I mean, those are the miracles. Emergent phenomena are miracles. But then if you say that there are miracles, they say that you're crazy. But they're actually calling miracles, life, the self-assemble, a cell, the self-assemble. Are you kidding? Are random events? I mean, that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard. From a physicist, from a scientist that want to understand how those things can happen.
I'd like to take a couple steps back and share something with you and hear your thoughts on it, if you're finished your thought
Sure,
there.
that's fine.
So we're looking at a few concepts here. We're looking at the idea of nothing, and you can't get something from nothing. And we're looking at the idea of potential. Are you familiar with Arthur M. Young?
No.
The inventor of the Bell helicopter?
Oh, yeah, okay.
You would love his.
Okay.
So Arthur, he wrote several books. I've studied them all. The Reflexive Universe is his biggest one. But once he made his money from the Bell helicopter, he created an institute to study consciousness, and that's what he spent the rest of his life doing. And like you, he's a very, very deep and powerful mind. And he was very, very studied in all the world's religions and metaphysics and philosophy. And there's many great interviews with him on the new Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove. He's been dead for a long time now, but his books are very powerful. And so there's some things he says that I want to share with you. Now, he is making a statement, and the statement he's making is based on Taoist concepts in many ways, but I'm going to present to you what he's sharing because it's very relevant to what we're talking about here. He says, non-being is significant because it is aware of being. So if you take the Taoist concept of Tai Chi as the entanglement of life, that which is in form, moving, tangible like a body, like a planet, like a star. He is saying to be in a state of being, you have to exist. So he's saying non-being is significant because it's what's aware of being. So that's the first step of what I want to share with you. Second step is that the problem with materialists trying to explain how you get something from nothing is that the concept of nothing, I don't believe exists in God. I say it's not nothing, it's no thing, because potential is not a thing. So if you think of God as the potential to create, it is not a thing. It's the non-being that is aware of being. And in my model, I call that big C, the consciousness that's aware of all phenomenon.
Yeah, but what you're saying is that matter is non-being. The matter is matter is being, and so so you call non-being the lack of matter, so that can still exist. So the issue is that what does exist or not, and existing. I mean, nothing cannot exist in my but there are definitions. Really, at the end, there are definitions. Nothing is something that that does not exist. Potentiality is something that exists, but in a hidden way, in a non-manifested way, in a way that cannot be known yet, but is potentially knowable. Okay, and that's but therefore existence, the deepest level of existence is potentiality, but is existence. I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
I understand. I'm trying to use normal language to communicate something that isn't really built to be communicated in the structure of our language.
No, it's true. But if you think deeply about, you can see that you cannot say that potentiality is something that doesn't exist. In fact, it has to exist. The potential, the voltage, the voltage of a battery, which is the potential of the battery. If you want to, when you were talking about that earlier, that potential exists, but just like, the state of a field exists. But the state of the field is not the field. Not only that, but is a state, and it is part of the field, and it is, and we think that this, we use the notion of a field in order to be able to explain things. But in fact, we explain things by introducing concepts that cannot exist in the space-time that we understand as space-time. What I'm trying to say is that, you see, the ideas that we have of space-time as a container somehow, right, of reality, is wrong. It cannot be that way. It must be an epiphenomenon of our perception of reality, not what it actually is. So, for example, in my model, for example, space is more like the memory of the experience of one. In other words, it's seen. You have to see that. And we look at that since we do not see the symbols that one looks at to know, to remember itself, to whatever his own experiences, or all the entities that have their experience stored in space. We don't see that stuff, so there is nothing for us. But for the entities that they wanted to create the memory of their own experience. They created space, and for us is space. It's a container, but for them is the memory. And the aspect of container comes as a byproduct of the memory that they wanted.
Well, there would be no reason for space if you did not have something to experience.
Yeah, empty. What sense would they have empty space? So if it's empty, we call it empty. Of course, we also know that it's not empty, because quantum physics, there is the 0-point energy, right, of the space, the empty space. So and if you calculate how much energy there is, it's huge. It's like 10 to 150 watts, or something like that. I mean, unbelievably to imagine numbers. So where's the energy coming from? What does it mean? What does it do? Nobody knows.
I think one way I would like to present to you because now that I'm hearing your perspectives, it's helping me reshape what I'm trying to say. If we take Arthur M. Young's statement, non-being is significant because it's aware of being, if we say potential is unbound and being is that which is energy in formation, geometry, body, shape. So you have source potential is unbound, and then that which is being is bound because it's in a state of information. It's got a formation. So there's some sort of meaning being conveyed by
the
it.
way to read, for me, the way I read the sentence is non-being is consciousness, or consciousness is aware of being, of matter, of symbols,
Yes,
of symbols, what I call symbols.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And that's what I'm saying. I've been said that for 20 years or so now. Basically, non-being is the stuff that is not matter, but so but it's not even energy. So because the idea is that if it isn't matter in physics, then it must be energy. That's it, because there's only energy and matter in space and time. That's it. There's nothing else. No, there is more. In fact, with space, time, matter, and energy, you can only explain, not even quantum physics, you can only explain what manifests from a world that we call quantum physics. They can only give you probabilities, but it doesn't give you what manifests. And the rest of it, yes, then you can tell the rest. If you could tell what manifests, then you could say the rest, tell the rest with the physics that we know. But we don't know that. What manifests is an act, our act of free will of entities that have consciousness. Because to have free will, you must be conscious. Because otherwise, what does it mean to have free will if you're not conscious? You don't even know what you want. Then it is randomness. If a field with free will but not consciousness has collapse of the wave function, it will be a random, non-algorithmic manifestation, which is exactly what is the collapse of the wave function.
It's very, very interesting. I love these kinds of conversations, and it's fun to be able to talk to you because I can share concepts. And I want to bring up another concept before I move on, because I think this is important for our conversation. There's a real tendency in science and cosmology to try to mathematically validate everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you look at that and the nature of our conversation, you see, I'm trying to share how I understand things that you're perceiving from your perspective. And so I think the tendency for us is to, whatever our mode of conscious perception is, be it a scientist, a physicist, a metaphysician, a mystic, I think it's important, and I'm speaking kind of poetically here, I think God is as much of an artist and a poet and a story writer and storyteller as a scientist, as a mathematician, etc. So I would just love to hear your thoughts when we look at the possibility that maybe we need to look at God from the musical perspective, or from the perspective of art, or from the perspective of poetry. I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach this mystery and still be just as accurate as any other of the perspectives.
Well, I mean, to me, we exist within one, right? We are part whole of one. So we are inseparable from one, just like an electron is inseparable from its field. The formula that describes spaghetti is not the same as the spaghetti that I eat, even if they describe the spaghetti that I'm eating. So there is a big difference between ontology and epistemology, or representation, right? So the representation of reality, or a theory of reality, is not reality, and mathematics stops at the boundaries. At least the mathematics that we know, that describes the deepest thing which we know, which is the quantum state of a field, which is these vectors, unit vectors in Hilbert space, n-dimensional Hilbert space, complex Hilbert space. I mean, this reality only can give you a symbol for something that for you is an experience. For me, that symbol that represents the state of my field, of who I am, that symbol to me is an experience. And nobody other than me can have the experience of that symbol. You understand the power of this thing. I mean, we are infinitely more powerful than the math. Besides, who creates the math? Our consciousness, our comprehension. Because we that understand want to find a model of what we understand, and that's mathematics. So only a conscious being can create new mathematics. But I cannot create, there is nothing mathematical that can express something that I do not understand yet. That if one doesn't understand something, the mathematics that later may be able to express what one has known now about that, whatever he didn't know before, did not exist. Nobody could ever even thought about it, because it could only be thought by one, or a part of one, which would be one of us. We could create by having, because our comprehension becomes one's comprehension. We are, in a sense, ministers of one, in the sense that our experience, our self-knowing, feeds the self-knowing of one. So if we are able to know something new about ourselves that even one had not thought about, I think that's possible, because we are parts whole. We're not.
Well, yeah, we're like cells in the mind of one.
Absolutely. We're not puppets. We're not puppets. Okay. So.
No. Yeah, we're actually part of the process.
Absolutely. Part of the process of one knows itself. So we can invent something that never existed before in the universe, not in planet Earth, in the universe. When we do that, then the mathematics that expresses that new thing that we have created can exist, because now we can describe what we have done. But before knowing what we have, knowing something new, not something that is a recombination of something that we already know. Something new is something that did not exist before. That's another thing the scientists don't understand typically. They think that everything is a combination of what already exists. No. In fact, quantum physics tells you exactly that when you do the superposition of quantum states, you get something that is much more than the sum of what you put together. Only in classical physics, the sum of the parts is the whole. The whole is simply the sum of the parts in classical physics. But in quantum physics, the sum of the parts, which is the superposition of parts, is not the same. It cannot be described cannot describe the properties of the new thing that emerges. It's simple. Look, you take an electron and a proton, you combine them together the way the quantum combination means, you create an atom of hydrogen. The atom of hydrogen has properties that are way beyond the sum of the properties of the electron and the proton. It's a completely new creation. It's an unbelievable thing.
The analogy that I would give that correlates to that is, if you take hydrogen and two parts of oxygen and bring them together, you create something completely novel called wetness. But without that relationship, there would be no wetness.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shift gears slightly into something that I think you'll be able to give quite an answer to. A year or so ago, I produced a video for my YouTube audience called "The Danger of Living in Two Realities." And I pointed out that the natural world is an analog reality, which we call nature, in which our bodies exist and we have to feed and sustain ourselves. And that the other reality that I was referring to is the digital reality, which can be useful when managed intelligently, but dangerous when generating realities that distract us from our responsibilities for caring for the reality in which we have our biological existence. And so I was warning people, you got to be careful, because we are actually getting so distracted with digital realities that we're losing focus on the one we have to take care of, because how we manage it determines our health and our vitality. You poison the water, you poison yourself. You poison the sky, you poison yourself. You poison the fields, call it commercial farming. you slowly kill yourself, and you can justify all sorts of things and create all sorts of digital illusions and believe them as though they're as real as the tree in your backyard, but you're paying more attention to your phone than the tree that feeds you. So I'd like to know if you could share your thoughts on how creating digital realities or illusions is or isn't contributing to our ability to care for the planet, meet our body, mind, health, and growth needs, and our ability to grow and develop psychologically and spiritually. Is that a clear question?
Of course. I think it's very simple.
Good.
It's very simple. Basically, we are here for a purpose. But of course, scientism says there is no purpose. The only purpose is the survival of the fittest. Okay, that's scientism. Okay, so but we are here for a purpose, and if that purpose that we're here for, which is a higher purpose, it's not the purpose of matter, nor the purpose of computers. It's the purpose of who we are, which are fields, conscious fields with free will that want to know themselves. We want to know ourselves because one wants to know itself. And so we are part wholes, that together we're going to know each other and ourselves. So if we then use technology not to pursue the goals that we are here, the purpose that we are here to do, but simply to distract us, to simply, waste our time, live in a virtual world to, so that we, to have fun or whatever, with something that is not the purpose that we're here, then that technology will be destructive. That technology will be destructive because it will not serve the purpose that we're here. And then the deeper reality is simply, either wipe us out as a species because we're not doing what we were supposed to do, but because it doesn't wipe out who we really are. It's us that we say, okay, this kind of reality that we're built doesn't work, so we had to start over. And so the destruction is not to punish. It's simply because it doesn't serve the purpose that, the reality that we have created doesn't serve the purpose that it was supposed to be created. If you have a knife that can allow you to live and you use it to kill, well, then you're not doing the right thing. And if you take digital electronics and you use it to waste your time instead of doing what you're here to do, well, it could help you tremendously do much better and faster what you are here to do, then you shouldn't exist. Giordano Bruno said something similar, 16 something, in this
15 something,
16 something, yeah. So it was killer 16 something. I forgot about the exact date, but
I think he was born in like 1548 or something. I've studied Bruno. He's an amazing guy.
And he said basically that if technology will not be used to find God or find out who we are, basically something like know ourselves, it will distract us. The technology must be used for the purpose, the deeper purpose that we have. And if we don't use it for the deeper purpose, we use it to make weapons, to make more powerful weapons, which is a lot of what we have done in the past. And we use it to waste our time, to have an alternative life to the one that we should use responsibly to do the work that we are come here to do. Then you're not, then you shouldn't live, and not for, as I say, not for punishment, but because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Not the body, who we are.
Yeah, it'll be like sort of an experiment that we conclude with saying, well, that didn't work.
It fails. So, send a meteorite, wipe us out, and and we go, who we are. We go to another planet, and and have create a different society, hopefully, where we have learned something from this one. We'll screw up this one, and we go somewhere else. That's the kind of thinking. Obviously, it's simplified, but from the principle point of view, I believe that it must be so, because technology is there. It should help our real purpose, just like anything. And so, if we don't use it for that purpose, it becomes, it is counterproductive, because it gives you power. It gives you power to create or to destroy. So if we don't create, we destroy, because it must be used, or else you don't use it, and it's like you didn't have it. So if you use it, you better use it well, because if you don't use it well, it will be self-destructive.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that a lot of people have lost the inner compass orientation or the desire to answer the question, who am I? What am I really? And ancient throughout history, that was a much more deep question. The whole field of yoga was built on that question, who am I?
But if you
And so
but if you
I think we've gotten distracted from that.
But Paul, if we have been trained by scientism, not scientists, but people that believe in scientism, right? By the worldview of scientism, we know who we are. We are machines, right? We have been told since we are born that we are machines. So why should we find out who we are? We are machines. The authority has already told us who we are. So that's the point. The point is that we think that we know who we are, and we have lost contact with who we are, because then when they tell you are a machine, then you say, don't worry about the feelings. The feelings are, they make you suffer. Don't, that's pushing them away. And intuition, don't believe them. They really deceive you. So, only believe rationality like the machines. I mean, this kind of, subtle and less subtle, direction that we are given, by the entire system, from our parents to the schools and to everything, business and everything, is all about, this kind of competition instead of cooperation, for example. I mean, the principle of life is the most destructive principle imaginable. Is the survival of the fittest, where the fittest, if you ask the definition, is the one that survives. So, is the survival or the one that survives? Have you ever heard a more stupid principle than this one? The principle of life is the survival of the one that survives. Or the ones that survives. I mean, nobody can define what it means to survive other than surviving. But it eliminates the evidence that we have 30 to 50 trillion cells that work together to allow us to find our way to the bathroom, because the cells cope. I mean, if every cell were fighting against each other, we wouldn't even be able to do that.
No. Now, I brought that question up about the two realities, but I'm going to take it one step deeper, because you know who David Chalmers is. I read his book. I read his recent book, Reality Plus, and it concerned me quite a lot, because he is quite in love and I would say addicted to this whole digital reality, and makes many arguments that there is no difference between the validity of a digital reality and this one, and goes into all sorts of very interesting, crazy stuff, and talking about now that there's ethics within games, and it's too much to explain. I wouldn't even. I would tell you to read it, but I would say it would probably piss you off, because
I have already read a few articles, recent article of him, and I see that he has made a turn, because before he felt that perhaps panpsychism was the only possible explanation of solving the hard problem of consciousness, which he brought up as we talked earlier. So he moved away from any sort of idealism to the most silly, frankly, mechanicism, which is the digital mechanicism. It doesn't even recognize the existence of quantum physics, for Christ's sake.
Hi, everybody. This is Paul Chek. I come to give you a little message. I want to share some empathy. I know how hard it is to change your behavior when you got some bad diet and lifestyle habits, and you look at that coffee, or you look at the sugar, or you look at the junk food that you're in love with, and you reach for it because it's quick and easy, and you keep telling yourself, I need to change, I need to change, I need to change. But eventually the system breaks down and you get motivated by the pain teacher. But what if I gave you an opportunity to try something that would help you start the process of behavior change and enjoy it and look forward to it? Well, I have something for you.
It's Organifi's red juice. It tastes great, and it's loaded with nutrition and lots of vitality for you. And I got Drew Canoli here to tell us why it works so well for behavior change and increasing your life force and your vitality. Drew, what's the magic in that red juice? Because everybody seems to love it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. Sometimes when we're craving things, it's hard to switch a habit, a behavior.
Yeah.
So I looked at that fundamental fact and I'm like, well, what could we create that people could crave that actually tasted great? And that's when red juice was born for energy. So between the berries, the blueberries, the raspberries, the strawberries, the best quality organic glyphosate residue free, the rhodiola and the cordyceps, we were onto something. We sweetened it with a dash of monk fruit. And literally, I started to come to life when I drank this. I had so much more energy than I would normally have. Stamina went through the roof. I actually shaved off 45 seconds off my mile time drinking red juice before I ran.
Wow.
Talk about an uptick in nitric oxide production in your body, right?
Something went up.
Yeah.
We know speed.
Actually, it's funny you say that because I get messages all the time about sexy time.
Oh, yeah?
When people drink red juice.
Something's going up.
Something's going up. And I get so many messages about that. That's funny you brought that up.
Well, we hope it's the flag these days.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking for more energy and stamina and something that tastes great to where you could shift your cravings, keeping your hunger and your energy in check.
And feel good about it.
And
you might even break down a little bit and wander back. But if you've got some natural sweetness and a lot of nutrition, you probably, if you're honest with yourself, won't need as many chips or as many of whatever your little thing is. But you can do this naturally and easily, and that's what I'm all about. Naturally and easily and honestly. And, it all starts with being honest with yourself. So if you want a great tasting behavioral switch technique that's really good for you, it has a lot of knock-on benefits for you and your whole family, try red juice. Go to Organifi.com, Organifi.com. And because I love you, Living 4D listeners, so much, I've organized for you to get a 20% discount with the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20. And that's as fast as I can say that. I love you guys. Enjoy your red juice.
Quantum physics does not say what quantum classical physics says. So a lot of philosophers, they have not taken the time to understand what quantum physics is saying. In quantum physics, all the principles, almost all the principles of quantum physics are the opposite of what our the digital world does. And so it's crazy to actually embrace that kind of ethos and ideas to explain the deeper reality that we are. Is the scientism of the scientism now.
It concerned me quite a lot because he's very famous. He has a lot of influence, and that book's going to be read by a lot of people. And then you have Ray Kurzweil and all these people that believe you can upload your soul to a hard drive, and kind of the World Economic Forum, Yuval Noah Harari crap. And so I'm listening to this, reading this, listening to it. I listened to it on audio, most of it, and I'm taking notes, and I'm going, man, this is such a dangerous way to condition people's minds because it's leading us into a departure from the nurture of, if you take the tasks of life down to their root level, we have to clean, feed, nurture, and protect. Your cells have to detoxify, clean. We have to feed or we can't exist. We have to nurture life and we have to protect life. And the more you go into a digital reality, the more you begin to depart from the responsibilities of cleaning, feeding, nurturing, and protect not only your own body, but the environment within which it...
Absolutely. And it is an attempt to provide the ideology of, as I said earlier, of the scientism of scientism, the digital scientism, because at least the scientism is based on physics and not just on the computer, which is only a portion of the classical physics. So it's basically, the ideology that then justifies AI the way AI often is presented, which is against mankind, because the AI will be better than you, more intelligent than you, blah, blah, blah. Right. I mean, this kind of way of doing is so destructive that people, that it's a crime against humanity. The humanity in the sense of the real values that we have. Just like the principle of the survival of the fittest is a crime against humanity, because it justifies egotistic, I kill you, so I'm the one that survives, therefore I'm the fittest. That I'm fit the definition of what life is about, killing the other. So that I survive and you die, because survival is not a gentle word. Survival is I live and you die. And so, the power of words is very, very, very important. And using words in the wrong way can be so destructive. And we have seen that in history. But look, Nazism. Nazism was about an ideology of destruction, which ends up self-destroying. It ends up destroying the people that adopt that ethos. There is no other way. When you it's like they said what I was saying earlier. If you don't use technology properly, it will destroy you, because you have created something powerful only to be used properly, and if you use it improperly, it will be more destructive and it will destroy yourself.
I'm going to post a thought to you that I think I'm very interested in your response to. This is an observation, and Steiner warned about this in his own words, but basically what Steiner was saying is the more of your time you spend using and engaging technology, the more you become like the technology you're using. And I think we've gotten so far down the technological rabbit hole, the machine for everything, that we have actually begun to orient our own thinking processes to be more and more machine-like, and our behavior to be more and more machine-like. And now you have people that are married, and I'll give you an example. I was in the airport sitting, waiting for the plane across from what looked like husband and wife, and they didn't say a word to each other, but they each had their phones and they were talking back and forth. One would send a text, the other one would look and smile and then respond. And I'm like, okay, that's exactly what Steiner was warning about. And so I think we've got to be very careful, because we're actually becoming less and less conscious and more taken over by the machine mentality, which Steiner referred to as Ahriman, by the way. But I'll give you a great example of this, and I won't ask you to watch the whole thing, but I want to point something out that I think you will find mind-blowing, especially with your level of awareness and knowledge. There's a documentary on Amazon on the Blue Angels, the fighter jet pilots. If you watch the first 15 or 20 minutes of that documentary, you will see the best pilots in the world sitting in hours and hours of meetings where they're going through all the maneuvers and they're practicing all the calls and commands. And you will literally see that these people walk, talk, and move like machines. They have spent so much time fusing themselves into these F-18 fighter jets that their mannerisms, they move and actually act like machines. And for me, that's a deep concern. I think, because the further you go into the machine mentality and the machine way of relating, the further you get from the analog world of nature and the rhythms of life and the feelings of life. And I think that's something that most people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, consciousness, I've said, is what allows you to become what you experience. So in other words, you, just by experiencing only those things, you become, is a property of consciousness. Just think about when you were a kid, 3-4-year-old, 5-year-old, probably 5-6, that kind of age range, 5-6-year-old, 7. That, when you would lose yourself in a game, meaning truly you become the game. You are the game, because you've lost the sense of self. You lost the sense of where you are. You're just with these kids, and you are just playing your heart to your heart's content, and you don't know if it's day, night, if there is dinner time or whatever, right? Until mom calls you, and then you and then you sort of wake up from this environment that you have created where you became the game. See, this is a property of consciousness. We become what we believe, for example. We become what we experience. And so if you believe that you are a machine, you will become a machine.
Yes, this is why I think water is such a great analogy for consciousness, because it takes the shape of any vessel.
That's right.
No matter what you pour it into, it takes the shape of it. And anyhow, I before we move on to the next thing, I wanted to share a quote from David Bohm that I thought you would quite appreciate if you haven't heard it. Bohm, in one of his interviews, said, "Real thinking is hard work. That's why most people rearrange their prejudices and call it thinking." And I think that's a big problem in the world today.
Well, real thinking takes a lot of dedication. Real thinking means not repeating what somebody else says, but finding the truth. You have to find the truth within yourself.
Yeah, and you have to create space in yourself to do real thinking. You have to have workspace in yourself. Bohm also said something in this regard. He said, "No man can do deep thinking until he has a healthy ritual in his life, or healthy rituals, like to stabilize him, And I think these are very important concepts.
To me, the ritual was 20 years of work, in understanding consciousness, and in that process, finding peace of mind, so to speak, basically being able to open my mind and free the mind of all kinds of extraneous things. So when I write, for example, I am in this open space. There is nothing moves around. There is a space, and I'm ready to capture what comes into this space, which is what I want typically, or is in aligned with what I want. So that allows you, because real thinking is to be in touch with your higher self, where the real thinking is.
Absolutely.
And so the ego that communicates, the ego and your body that communicates with your higher being. And so you open up to that channel of information that is always available, but before it's available, you need to get rid of the noise and the confusion that you have in your head typically, until you have, and that takes a lot of discipline, takes a lot of hard work.
It definitely does. I want to talk to you about artificial intelligence. I loved your dialogue with Andre on the Know Thyself podcast when you were talking about artificial intelligence. I personally feel we should all be very conscious of the fact that the word artificial comes before the word intelligence. I think most people overlook that. So I've got a list of questions that I want to ask you in regard for your perspective. So I'll start with the first one and see how far we can get in 15 minutes. Can AI become conscious the way a human being is conscious, self-aware, capable of meaning making?
No. As simple as that. No, because consciousness and free will, which are both necessary, already you can see that a machine does not have free will, right? No scientist ever said, they are actually doubted that we have free will. So why? How could an AI have free will? No chance, right? The AI has the will of the builder of AI, the will of the master that wants AI to do what they want. Okay, so that's the danger, because they are agents of somebody else's will, which is free. Okay, but apart from that, consciousness and free will are quantum properties. You cannot explain consciousness and free will if not with properties of quantum fields. So a quantum field, it goes beyond quantum computers. Quantum computers do not have free will. So when they are in a quantum state, there is something conscious associated with the system, which is the computer. But it's not the consciousness of the quantum computer. It's something associated. That is an epiphenomenon of the quantum computer. Quantum computer, not a classical computer, quantum computer. But because the quantum computer does not have free will, because it is deterministic, the algorithms that a quantum computer runs are deterministic algorithms. So it doesn't have free will. So it cannot act intelligently to true intelligence, because the true intelligence requires being connected with your consciousness, which is where the comprehension is, and do and act properly. Only living things, living cells, can act as drones of the field that controls them. Our body, which is quantum and classical, is a drone of the field that controls our body. So even us even our body cannot be, the body without the field that controls the body is not conscious. So, even that, now we may have cells that are conscious, but the body consciousness, which is the superposition of the consciousness of all the cells, does not exist.
I want to put this on the table for you. I feel that the impetus to create all these AI systems and kind of extend that out to the machine world is an attempt to imitate the experience that we can ultimately only have and gain and grow in through self-realization. In other words, all this effort to create imitations. I'm going to share something with you that Steiner said, because I think you're really going to appreciate it. Steiner said, man will continue to invent technologies outside of himself until he either destroys the world or realizes that everything he's invented outside of himself is an inferior copy of what's inside of himself. The question is, which will come first?
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. In some way, I said the same thing, but with completely different phrases. But basically, if you don't use properly technology, technology will destroy us. The interiority, where the meaning, where consciousness, the field, the quantum field is the interiority that is the essence of what we are, and the creator of the exteriority. So you cannot create, the creation cannot create the creator. Consciousness cannot be created by math. Math cannot create consciousness. It is consciousness that creates math. But this idea is so strongly held that even the people that believe that consciousness is a phenomenon in itself that goes beyond even quantum phenomenon, they want to explain it with math. No, it's consciousness that explains the math. It's the other way around. In fact, I made the same mistake, and I changed my tune a little bit. I tuned up my presentation because I was saying consciousness and free will must be taken as fundamental. But then I was trying to explain them with properties of quantum physics. And so I said, no, that's stupid. I have to just turn it around. The existence of consciousness and free will can explain why quantum physics must exist with those properties. Because it's to serve, that mathematics is there to represent the world that serves and is created by consciousness. So it cannot be the other way around. It cannot explain the creator. The creator can explain why the mathematics has to have those properties, because they are the properties of conscious experience, which is, I mentioned earlier, no cloning theorem and Olivos theorem, which is you can only get 1 bit out of it, of the state to know 1 bit per quantum bit, except the owner that can know from the inside. But then when you have to explain, you must use symbols that are shareable, and those must be classical symbols. And those cannot tell the entire experience, because the love that I feel, I cannot sound it to you. I cannot share it with you. I can only tell you about it. But what I can tell you about is much less than what I feel. So in other words, interiority is much deeper and stronger and richer than any exteriority. So you cannot, from exteriority, explain interiority. But you can explain exteriority starting from interiority.
My next question is, when corporations harvesting data from the public to train AI do so, they are they not putting the same biases into AI that are constant challenges for humanity?
Of course, it's obvious. I mean, AI doesn't understand anything because only consciousness, which is not an AI phenomenon, is not a digital phenomenon, can understand. In fact, AI cannot feel anything, which is feeling is before understanding. Feeling, as I said earlier, is the carrier of understanding, of comprehension, of meaning. So digital computers are 2 steps removed from feeling, from comprehension, from meaning. And the words that we use are not, they're not to describe qualia, they are to describe meaning. That's what we want to describe with our words. So the deeper, we can try to use the words to explain also qualia, but the deeper point is, I don't want to see the way what I feel when I love you, but I mean, because I cannot, I know that I cannot. So I want to use words to help you get the same meaning that I get from my love. So I'm communicating the meaning of my love to you, not what I feel. If I try to communicate what I feel, is because I expect you to understand from the feeling, your feeling, the meaning of your love, so that it's meaning the same meaning of my love.
The closest I can get to your feeling is to use my feeling body.
Yeah.
Not my rational mind.
Absolutely. That is quantum, that is live information, by the way. Which is richer than the words, because it's quantum and classical. It's both quantum and classical. It's richer than the words, but it's still not enough to describe the actual state that I am. Is a short, it cannot go that far.
Right.
To me, that's the essence of that problem.
Yeah, it's very beautifully put, and I'm really grateful that I was able to talk to you about that and the upcoming questions to the degree we can get through them. But this is very important for people to hear from you. So what are the pros and cons of having AI take over more and more of the systems that human beings interact with, such as the military, air traffic control, medicine, government, social engineering, etc.?
Potential self-destruction. You cannot.
That's simply
Absolutely,
put.
you cannot delegate to an unintelligent, meaning something that doesn't understand, decisions that require understanding. You cannot. It's foolish and destructive to do that. So if people do that, they will kill innocent people even more than we do. And we do that too. And we do that too, because the moment that you believe to be a machine, the moment that you disconnect with your inner life, then the values, there is no more values. What are the values? What does it mean to be ethical when you believe to be a machine, and when you die there is nothing else and you just have survival of the fittest? You kill the other guy. That's what happens in the world today. I mean, a lot of soldiers, the soldiers that actually have still some connection with their deeper sense are the ones that get PTSD when they leave, the military, because they are, their capacity to, they have not been able to disconnect enough from their feelings to do what they did or to witness what they witnessed.
Right. Yeah. You probably don't know this, but I used to be a paratrooper.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've lived that life. I know all about it. What are the ramifications of training human beings to be dependent on external thinking devices at the expense of developing their own capacities for effective thinking, problem solving, and skills development?
Faster self-destruction.
Yeah, okay. But my concern, and the reason I'm asking the question, is because the more you depend on external devices, the more you atrophy your own abilities. And the next thing you know, when there's a power outage, you're useless.
I mean, these ideas of implanting stuff in your brain so that you can become even more machine than a machine. I mean, this is, again, acceleration of self-destruction of mankind. Okay? Not benefactor of humanity, but destructor of humanity.
I wanted to share an experience that I had with you in my training. I used to repair weapon systems on Cobra helicopters. That was my job in the 82nd Airborne Division. Before I became the trainer of the Army boxing team. I represented the Army in boxing and triathlon. But when I was in school, I had to go to math school, and then I had to go to electronics school for a year before I could go to my unit and actually work on the helicopters as my profession. But when I was in training, they would not allow us to use calculators. We had to do it all long form. And the instructor said, if your equipment gets hit by a missile or a bomb or it gets destroyed and you cannot fix the helicopter, you are useless to us in a battlefield. So we actually had to spend countless hours, 8 hours a day in training, doing everything, circuit loads, building all by hand, all by math. And the instructor, not only that, if the instructor looked at your answers on a test, intuited that you got the right answer, but didn't know how you got it, he would come to you and make you explain every single step. So by the time you graduated, you literally could build and repair these things with no computers and no testing equipment. You knew how to do it.
That's the difference between education and instruction. You were educated. You were educated so that you understood what you were doing and saying. Where instruction is when you repeat like a computer what the book says, what the instruction says. And today there is much more instruction than education in the schools and everywhere.
It's a problem, and I see, they've taken physical education out of schools, and the most common excuse is we need money to buy more computers. Kids are using calculators in math class, so they're not really learning the process of math. And, they're doing art on computers instead of with brushes, pens, and real art. And I'm watching this, and, I left school. I only completed the 9th grade, and then I educated myself by just finding experts at things and studying with them and working for them. And so I see that kids are getting dumber and dumber. They can't do, they don't even know how to weed a garden or do practical things. And I'm, my kids are in a Waldorf school because Steiner was very, very cautious. In fact, they're not allowed to watch any television during the week. Every couple of months, they take a 1-month fast from all media. They make costumes and act out plays. They do art. They really teach them how to think and how to get engaged in the process. But I'm watching our education system turn into a machine learning environment, and it's devastating.
Yeah. That's what you get when when you're trying to cut corners and not really do what is foundational. Foundational is understanding, not repeating, and so we are becoming more artificially intelligent than our machines if we keep on doing what we're doing.
That's too funny. I mean, it's sad funny, but you hit the nail on the head. I remember that one. That's worth repeating. Here's an important one for you, and if you want to stop after this one, I understand. The problem when I get a hold of a guy like you, I don't want to let you go. You're like the wise old man. I got to get close and rub on the knowledge. Here's my last one I'll hit you with. The production of AI systems is very costly to the planet. Large AI systems are extremely energy intensive. All the while, we are destroying nature for rare minerals to make the technology and largely using fossil fuel power plants to power the plants to run these huge computer systems. And this is the same challenge we face with converting to electric vehicles. One of my longest running clients and best friends worked on Wall Street. And the firm he worked for had a very powerful computer system. He used to monitor solar activity. He developed a system for monitoring solar activity, and he spent years watching how commodities moved as the sun changed its activity. So he developed a whole system of trading based on solar activity, and he became extremely wealthy. He retired a very wealthy man at 36. But here's the point. He was telling me, and I'm if I remember right, he said the computer they used cost over $100,000 a month for electricity alone. And so when we're talking about all these massive AI systems and controlling planetary systems, and all the computers, we're going to completely and utterly wipe the earth out doing that.
I mean, if you're one of the large companies that want to build a new computer for AI, you will, it will be hard to find an electric company that can give you the energy that you need. They say, oh, you cannot do it. You want 200 megawatts for your computer? We don't have it. So, so they have to build their own. So those guys will build their own nuclear plant probably, because it's the best way, so to speak, to do it, the most economical way, or, but with all the danger associated with that, or, with solar. Solar is cheaper than actually gas, and never mind coal is the cheapest way to do electrical energy, but you need huge batteries, and so they're not ready yet. But in 5 years, 5 to 10 years, the solar will be the way to go, because there will be batteries, so they store for a few days, so that you will be okay. And so so the problem is not as serious, given that we have solar that is now cheaper than gas. But 10 years ago, it was not that way. So,
yeah, the problem is all the minerals that are made to make the solar panels are coming. They're exotic minerals coming out of the mine from slave labor in China and Africa and all over the place. And you have to ask yourself, how much can we mine that out of the earth before we've so damaged the earth to make solar panels that we just create another problem?
Yeah. So there is not much more that I can contribute, other than, I agree with you. I mean, the trend is not good, right? Because instead of working together, there is ever more competition, there are more wars, more, there is more of this stuff that will get more of what we don't want. And that's the problem. And the problem is that we are in this spiral, which doesn't look good. And of course, there is the climate change, which there are many deniers. And the climate change is really the crunch. That's the one that will really test whether we are ready or not to move the next step as a species. In other words, if we can work together to solve that problem, then we are graduated to move to the next level. If we don't, because because we don't want to solve the problem, we simply fight each other, because we basically, the easiest way to solve the problem is to kill the other guys. They don't want to cooperate with you, or to cooperate, meaning to do what you want, not to cooperate. So, and then then there will be a disaster in the making. So that it's up to us, and that's why I'm really working very hard to get enough people that are open-minded, that have begun to think about this stuff, to understand that the scientism that is the fundamental, which is basically materialism, reductionism, the way of thinking about reality that defines us as machine. The universe is a machine. There is no purpose and meaning for the universe, and so on and so forth, which is what dominates the non-religious kind of way of thinking. But that way of thinking is completely self-destructive, and it is the same. It is the thinking that is behind then the machines that we build, the stuff that we do, and so on and so forth. And so all of our actions come from the deeper level, which is the level of our thoughts and beliefs. And if our beliefs are screwed up, our actions will be screwed up. Sorry, but that's the way it works.
Well, maybe as a closing comment, you can share your thoughts on what you feel is the way forward. Like if I could put you on a loudspeaker and reach everybody in the world with a statement as what we need to do now collectively to bring ourselves back into harmony with each other and nature, what would your directive be?
Well, very simple. You need to get in touch with yourself and do the work that it takes to understand whether you are a machine or not. And that work, you cannot read books. You have to find it out within yourself. You have the truth within yourself and the power to change within yourself. And start by adopting a principle of cooperation instead of competition, because we are here to know ourselves and to know the other like ourselves. And when we do that, then we find that we are love and that the other person is love. And only through love we can cooperate. And if we don't have love, we are going to compete, and we're going to have wars, we're going to have the disasters that we have had throughout our history. So we have the answer. Each one of us has the answer. And don't look at the answer from some expert. You are the expert of your own life. Look inside yourself. Read books by all means, but filter what you read with your own sense of self and your own study, personal study, and so on.
I tell people, use your heart to feel what you know.
Absolutely, and know that you are love. Deep down, we all are love. The way spirits manifest in our body is through love.
Yes. Well, Federico, it's been a beautiful dialogue, and I really appreciate the depth of the dialogue and what you've shared, and in many ways of reframing our viewpoints on things and a deeper understanding of the challenges of machines and digital reality. And we've covered a lot. Where can people find you, your books, or whatever resources or places you'd like to send them to, websites, etc.?
Well, the books are at Amazon, so you can find them easily. And I have a site. I want to do a little better job there because, I'm not spending enough time to kind of refreshing and doing the kind of work. But, I have a site, fagginfoundation.org, but I have there's lots of interviews in the YouTube. There are probably hundreds of the order of 100. And so many of the things that I didn't say will be in some of the other interviews. And I deep at work to go the next step. And so, which is another book, but also, moving into the application of this theory, because if you don't apply the theory doesn't become action, then it's not that useful. It's useful as long as it can guide proper action. And so my movement over time will be to be able to articulate what action to do to reflect the theory that I'm presenting and the view that I'm presenting, which is completely coherent with what the deeper spiritual doctrines have been saying and what physics has been saying. So it's a union of physics, which is the basis of science, and spirituality. So this theory can explain things in ways that so far we had not seen. Because if you are spiritual, it's intuition. You don't know what you're talking about. If you are physicist, and if you are on the other side, but then matter doesn't exist, and who cares? We live in we are spirit, and that's it. No, we're all three. We are matter. We are body, mind, and spirit, and indivisible. Even matter is not separate from mind, and mind is certainly not separate from spirit, and spirit is not separate from mind. So we are one, and that is the core message of the deepest spiritual traditions in the world.
Yeah, I really agree with everything you've shared. So thank you very much, Federico. It's been a great pleasure. And anytime when you get your new book out, if you want to have a podcast to promote it and talk about it, your assistant knows how to reach me. You're welcome anytime. And I'm very grateful for all the work you're doing and your commitment to everything, for your own growth and for helping us all have a deeper understanding and new perspectives. I think it's needed in the world. So I'll close by saying thank you to my sponsors for your love and support and your great products and supporting the people that are caring for the planet, organic farmers, regenerative farmers, biodynamic farmers. And thanks to all of you for anything you get from the sponsors. It supports the planet, it supports you, and it supports the podcast. Thanks for all of you that have joined Federico and I. I hope you really take his offering to heart, read his books, Irreducible and Silicone. And keep your eye out for his third book coming. Do you have a title for your new book yet?
Well, in Italian, yes, it's called Beyond the Invisible, where science and spirituality meet, or actually merge. So it will be in English hopefully soon. But it's doing very. It's a bestseller in Italy.
Awesome! I can't wait to get my hands on it. Is it going to come out on an audiobook by chance?
That's up to the publisher. I'm sure.
Awesome. Okay, I like listening to books while I train. That way I can do two things at once.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Federico. Lots of love to you. Thanks to all of you. I'll talk to you next time, and many blessings.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Federico Faggin. You can visit Federico's websites at federicofaggin.com and fagginfoundation.org, or connect on social media on X and Instagram at Fede Faggin, that's FEDEFAGGIN, on Facebook at federico.faggin.37, and on LinkedIn at Federico Faggin. Federico's autobiography, Silicon, From the Invention of the Microprocessor to the New Science of Consciousness, and his latest, Irreducible, Consciousness, Life, Computers, and Human Nature, are both available on Amazon.com. Check the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast for details on the special offers from our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, and Organifi, as well as links to Paul's social media, his YouTube channels, and his blog. We invite you to become a member of Paul's Spirit Gym podcast. With your membership, you get access to exclusive extended episodes of Spirit Gym with Paul Chek, members-only Q&A opportunities with Paul and guests, access to the podcast members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can interact with other passionate listeners, and the chance to purchase exclusive Spirit Gym merchandise. You can subscribe today by going to paulchek.com/podcast. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.